Dr. Cate Shanahan is with me.
Hello, Anna Vocino of the
We've
Lovely
known
Voice.
each other a long time.
More than 10 years now.
More than 10 years.
Yes.
I mean, you were in the garage in North Hollywood.
In something like 2012, probably,
Yeah.
or maybe 2013.
It was real early. It was real. We were doing a podcast. We're doing Vinny's podcast, which I still do, the Monday show, and we were all in person, which doesn't happen anymore.
No, yeah, hardly. Yeah, I was in California at the time myself.
That's right. That's right. You were working with the Lakers, right? At that time?
Uh-huh. Yeah. So we went down for them, and then we buzzed up to your beautiful area, and it was great to meet you guys.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I'm so appreciative of having in-person time, because then when I don't see you for a little while and you pop back up with an amazing book called Dark Calories that I'm going to tell everybody to get, I can go, oh my gosh, we need to talk. It's been way too long. So here we are.
Here we are again, since I think my last time we talked was my previous book, the Fat
That's right.
Burn Fix.
That's right. Fat Burn Fix. So, okay. Dark Calories. I'm going to launch right into it, into the horrors that are the seed oils.
Yes.
As I've showed you, I've written a whole page of questions. I'm going to hold this up for a second so that people don't screenshot it and see my questions. They're very intelligent questions for whoever screenshots that. Why are we where we are with seed oils? Thank you for being the vanguard voice in this. I mean, I know you said you referenced so many studies in your book. You worked really hard on this book.
Yes, I did.
This was not a slapdash fly-by-night book. This was well thought out, well executed, well written. Everyone needs to get it.
Thank you. 500 plus references from peer-reviewed scientific papers. Yeah, lots of reading.
Girl. Well, okay. There's a lot of people who've been talking about this, but like you said in the very beginning of your book, it's buried behind paywalls, behind medicalese, behind lingo, behind studies that don't make any sense. So why have you chosen this as your work to bring to the forefront?
Yeah, the experts have been buried, right? There's a lot of folks who on social media who are talking about it, but they're not always getting the details right. And, it's on one level, you might say, well, why does it matter if you avoid them? If someone's telling you to avoid them, why does it matter the details? But the details matter because in this scenario, we are in a world where there are voices that want to shut down this message. They are the most powerful industries in the world, the nexus of big food, big pharma, and big healthcare. They all want to shut down this message. They all benefit with the status quo. So there's people who pop up after whenever I make any noise, people who pop up after me on the same show were assigned to the show to try to set the record straight. That happened after I was on Real Time with Bill Maher.
Really? Because I saw that. I was so excited to have you on there. And so tell us about that experience. Afterwards, there was a PR person, or what did they do? How exactly do they fight that battle?
So Bill Maher's producer told me that I was the first doctor he'd had on to talk about nutrition in many years because it was kind of a passion interest of his, and he just did not want it to become the nutrition show, right? The Real Time with Bill Maher's talking about nutrition show.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's what they told me. Then I was on the show. I said, seed oils are probably making people die from coronavirus. The young people that have metabolic disorders, diagnosed, often undiagnosed. That was an important and powerful message at the time. And it helped sell a lot of books. It got my book on the New York Times bestseller until it sold out. And then it was not restocked for 6 weeks. And so there's some maybe shutdown happening there. Like even the Kindle edition wasn't available. Why would that be?
Yeah, why would that be?
Yeah. And then 3 weeks after I was on Real Time with Bill Maher, Dean of Tufts University School of Public Health Policy and Nutrition named Dariush Mozaffarian came on to talk about nutrition and health and metabolism as well. And so, given what I'd heard from the producer that he really has very select people on, And Bill Maher was 100% on board with this. He read the book, he took notes, he implemented it in his life. I've heard him talk on later shows about, how he wishes that there were not seed oils in restaurants. So he's on board with this. So I know he was told by powers that be that he must have this Dariush Mozaffarian on to, reframe the conversation around metabolic health back to where the talking points we've all heard. We don't care enough about our health. So blaming the victim. We just need to exercise more and eat less, make sure to get those fruits and vegetables, the same old garbage that is not the real whole truth and selectively leaves out the seed oil part and how toxic they are. And he didn't even address it. Like, he did not even address it. So that they are wrong, or else he would have said, oh yeah, that other person is actually wrong. Right? If he felt he had the weight of truth behind him, he would have said that, oh, Dr. Cate Shanahan is wrong, and we need to, set the record straight here on that.
Yeah, he's not afraid to
not a word.
Say that if he feels it. Yeah.
Right. And so, but there was nothing said. So, so that's, right there is an example of how you got to get the message right, or else you'll be shut out. Well, I didn't give you the example of that. Let me give you the example. So other folks who've written and talk about it focus on other reasons why these things are unhealthy, like their linoleic acid content or the omega-6 ratio, or the fact that they're extracted with hexane, or the fact that they are processed. Like, that's all that they used to be machine oils. Some of those things are true. Some of those things are not true, but those are not the issue. And so when those kinds of points are raised, then people like Dariush Mozaffarian shut them down and do so in a direct way and say, no, that is a myth, and this is specifically why. And then they bring up, some of their, what I call marketing, but they would call scientific evidence.
Sure.
To make their case, to support their case, right? So, and that shuts it down for the people who need to hear it, for the people who are confused, for the people who haven't already tried it and experienced massive benefits, and, frankly, for dietitians and medical professionals. They're like, oh, good, thank God, I don't have to learn anything new.
Yeah. Which is a problem, which is part of the reason why we're in the predicament that we're in today, because the people who are supposed to be in charge of it all don't want to learn anything new. And yet, even in the time that I've been in this space, which is 12 years, you've dedicated your whole life to it. I've only been in this for 12 years. Stuff has changed. Stuff has evolved. We learn new information. When I wrote the first edition of my first book, I had, for the first printing of my first book, I had grapeseed oil in there because I still thought it was okay. And then I got to know you and your work, and I changed it to olive oil or avocado oil because it meant something to me to learn something new and update it. But I don't know if people are really wanting to do that. So let's go back to, gosh, there's so much to unpack here. The hexane was fascinating. The omega-6, the ratio thing is fascinating. There's so much that's fascinating, but ultimately I'm going to come at this from as a person who is cooking, and people are listening who want to cook good things for their family and they want to feed their families well. Plus, I manufacture a pasta sauce. I manufacture spice blends, and we're coming out with dressings. So the seed oil thing has been very, very important for the work that I'm doing to produce a premium quality product. Side note, the Emerald Lagasse marinara has soybean oil in it. And I can guarantee you Emerald Lagasse does not cook with soybean oil. I could go back and watch his shows and he would not pour soybean oil and say bam in the pot when he's making marinara. I can guarantee you. So like the fact that like we think that we're cooking at home with healthy stuff, but we're actually eating at restaurants or buying processed foods. So let's start at the very beginning. Food manufacturing. Why did this all come about? How come this was okay? How come it was deemed safe? And explain a little bit of the processing of refined seed oils.
Yeah. So the difference between healthy oils and these, what I call the hateful eight, and maybe I should list them out. So the hateful eight vegetable seed oils are different than olive oil and any traditionally healthy oil, traditionally used healthy oil. And so those are soy, sunflower, safflower, corn, canola, cottonseed, rice bran, and grapeseed, like I already mentioned. And then if you're outside the US, you don't have canola, you have rapeseed instead. And then there's this general blanket term, vegetable oil, which doesn't really discriminate between that's the industry term, and they're just it distinguishes it from whale oil, because the term goes back to when we were killing whales for their blubber and using it in lamps and perfumes and stuff like that. And so they had to distinguish the cottonseed oil and the olive oil, that were just different products and coming on the market had been on the market, coming on the market for different reasons. So they came up with the term vegetable oil, because it came vegetable. It's coming from, plants, not animals.
A plant source, not an animal source.
And a more proper term for the Hateful Eight would be vegetable seed oils. But even that's not the real right term, because sesame is a seed oil that is healthy. So that's why I came up with the term Hateful Eight. And other people are using that now and not exactly crediting me, but it came from me. So
I can think of a few people who are using it and not crediting you.
Yeah, right.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, right. Lots of gentlemen out there.
We see you.
Yeah, I mean, and that matters, because it knows, again, getting back to science and truth, you have to know who is saying the thing to know who to blame if they turn out to be wrong, and know also who is the real source to look for the actual details if you ever want to know more details. So it's important to cite your sources and not pretend you came up with it in a dream. Right, or the research that you did, all by yourself, was reading my website.
Right. The research I did, Googling Cate Shanahan's work and then plagiarizing it. Yes.
Yeah. So, that happens. Anyway, that's human nature. But so what happened is, how do these things get in the food supply? Let's take the example of cottonseed oil, because that was the first oil.
Yes.
So cotton seeds, as you might imagine, are a byproduct of the textile industry, cotton. So the seeds were just laying around, rotting in stinking piles. Industry said, oh, there's got to be something we can do in there. I know there's fat in there. Seeds generally have some fat, lots of uses for fat. So they originally did a whole bunch of processing and refining to turn it into, after failing, the first thing they try is feeding it to animals, right? Well, that killed the cows, because not because so much of the of inherent cotton seed problem, but it so happens that cotton seeds have a toxin in them called gossypol that is toxic. It's meant to protect the seeds from predation by little rodents, and so that's how cotton became the surviving textile that it was back in the day, because rodents wouldn't eat it. And so the original use for cottonseed oil was like candles and soap, and maybe some
Lampante.
Yeah,
the Italians call it lampante. You burn it in the lamp. You don't eat it. Yeah.
Yes, and that's an important point. The Italians also use that term, I'm not going to try and say it, in front of olive oil, because it's a lower quality olive oil that was used for lamps. It was the liquid oil that was used like kerosene, and it was similarly not suitable for consumption. And that is the similarity between all the Hateful Eight. And that's why all the Hateful Eight are toxic, because the crude oil has been so abused with heat and pressure. It's kind of like the Lampante oil is not virgin, right? The virgin oil is just gently treated. It's high quality olives. And the oil that comes out from that cold pressing does not need any further anything to be edible. It is edible and it's delicious.
Right.
You can filter out some of the particles, get the dirt out of there.
Yeah, you get some detritus in there for sure.
Yeah, but otherwise it's great to eat. That is not the case with, that was certainly not the case with cottonseed because of the toxin gossypol. And then the next one, the next oil to come along was soy. And the history of soy is important also because originally soy oil was just a total byproduct of the animal confinement industry. And this takes us to a different time. So the cottonseed oil was back when we were eating whale oil at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. And this was right after World War II, where soy oil started becoming like a surplus oil because after World War II ended, Americans were hungry for meat. We'd had the Great Depression and all the, the poverty and austerity. And then we had World War II, where so much food being produced was going to feed the troops. So people were starving for meat, and they really wanted that beef. And in order to fatten it all up, make the process happen quicker, they shipped the animals to feedlots, which shortened the time, right? So they fed them corn and soy, and that fattened them up so quick because it's so calorie dense, high in protein. It just makes animals get fatter. Those sorts of animals, ruminants, get fatter, and it accelerated the process. So we got our beef, but you could not leave the oil in the soy meal. You had to get it out because,
or else it would turn rancid.
Yes, it would turn rancid. And also, it's not so good to eat, feed cattle that much fat. They're low fat eating animals generally.
Right.
So, so they had all this soy oil laying around at the end of World War II, and the company that wanted to sell it, called Procter and Gamble, was having a hard time because the average housewife didn't want it. Didn't have a good flavor. It had some maybe off flavors in there that their sensitive chefs were detecting. Certainly wasn't like their olive oil that they loved, and had no taste, like butter and lard and the fats of the time. So Procter & Gamble had a marketing problem. And what they did was they hired the world's best ever marketing expert. And I talk about this man because he's interesting, Ed Bernays. A lot of people, serious people in marketing, they know his name.
Right.
He's considered the father of public relations. So he was the PR firm for Procter & Gamble to sell soy oil. And he came up with this ingenious plan, which is to have a medical group give it the seal of approval.
And now we have when I was a kid, it was 4 out of 5 dentists say chew Trident. So like it's everywhere now. Doctor approved.
Yes. And it's not just advertising. So here's Dark Calories, this book, it tells this story. And this story is the biggest scandal ever perpetrated on the American public by a medical organization. And it all started 70 years ago when this, relationship between the American Heart Association, that was the organization that took money from Procter & Gamble. And so they took $1.75 million. It was a donation, right? Obviously there were invisible strings attached. And here's the scandal, after the American Heart Association took their money, the doctors at the American Heart Association did something completely unethical. They started promoting vegetable oil like soy and cottonseed that the Procter & Gamble sold, as a way to prevent heart attacks. Okay. They started, this medical organization started promoting it in talks, in media opportunities, and
it worked.
In their book, they had an extremely popular, multiple million sold diet book called The Prudent Diet. And it recommended specifically these highly polyunsaturated oils. And they use the chemical term polyunsaturated all throughout the cookbook. So people of the era were trained to go after
you're basically indoctrinated into using that language.
Yes. And they were also trained that saturated fat was the big scary fat.
Right.
That's what you get from butter and animal fats and tallow, pretty high in all that saturated fat, and almost no polyunsaturates, right? So that was just the first part of the unethical behavior. It gets worse because they then spent, right. The American Heart Association, is important because they educate your doctor to this day on, what is a healthy fat, what is a healthy diet. The American Heart Association then spent that money doing decades worth of research to prove the point that they'd already made, right? And the research is full of bedazzling data. It's not organized. And when people analyze it, they're like, this doesn't prove a thing, right? I looked at it myself. I saw that there was absolutely nothing there, but it's so old and it's cited by newer articles that cite newer articles still. And this goes on. So there's a cycle, like every 10 years, they say, they create a new bunch of garbage research citing these studies. It all comes back to these studies which are called the 7 countries studies. And that story of the funding of the 7 country study is if doctors knew this, if doctors learned this basic history, there's nothing like conspiratorial here. It's in the American Heart Association's meeting minutes. This is just it's just the plain old history of the American Heart Association. If doctors learned this, some of them, the good ones, would be horrified about what they've been telling their patients for decades. Like I was, when I learned this, I was like, oh my God, I cannot in good conscience keep telling people to avoid butter and choose these heart healthy corn oil, Mazola. Instead, I had to change the way I practiced. So that's the scandal, big scandal. And we got to break it. We got to let it break. We got to share it with the world. Did we get disconnected?
Yep. We're back. We're back. Hold on.
Oh,
sorry about that. I'm trying to.
It's been recording the whole time, it says on my
end. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Yeah. It records locally. This happens because I live in the country and every now and then it wants to poop out. Yeah. But we're back. Okay. So I guess hi. Okay. Don't worry. We'll jump cut. We'll jump cut around it. I guess my question comes into the philosophical thing that I think most people ask themselves, and maybe it's, being a mom, these people who create these oils, they also have children and grandchildren. Don't they want to not make their own families sick, or are they just disconnecting completely and just saying, we'll just make money off of it. Who cares? Because it is everywhere. And we're going to talk later about how to be part of the solution. But how did the FDA and everybody deem this all to be safe? It's just over money, over like the donation, quote unquote, that you were talking about.
It was never tested. So it never had to be subjected to FDA approval.
Oh, well, that's a giant hoop that was not jumped through.
Because it originally entered, in the late 1800s, and there was zero regulatory oversight at that point in time. There's a great documentary called The Poison Squad that talks about how people put borax in milk, in old stale milk, to make it look better and taste a little better. Borax.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They could put whatever they wanted. They actually were putting arsenic in some foods. I forget. There was some reason. But
well, they had cocaine and Coca-Cola, so there's that too.
There you go. Right. So these oils were granted this special status called GRAS, or generally regarded as safe.
Okay.
And olive oil also was never tested. And that makes sense with olive oil, because olive oil has a history of thousands of years of consumption. Right. It's standard. There are standards, right? There is a society or whatever that deems it virgin, extra virgin, just regular oil that has been refined, right? So the industry there has infrastructure, and it makes sense there. But these oils are uniquely toxic. And we didn't even touch on this. So how, like, after the crude oil is squeezed out, they are inedible. The soy oil,
right. They're still toxic. They have to do more processes, right, to get it to be edible and digestible.
Yes. So a lot of people say, well, the processing is what makes it bad. No, the processing is what makes it edible. Right? Because if you were to try to force somebody to have, let's say, the crude canola oil or crude sunflower or soy oil, even organic, even the organic stuff that doesn't contain hexane, it has caustic compounds in it, and it would sting your eyes, and it would sear your nose, your sinuses. And if you were to force to take a swig of it, it would burn your mouth, your esophagus, your stomach, and you probably just regurgitate it back up. That's your body's protective mechanism. Probably that's why it's considered inedible, because literally you cannot consume this stuff. Yeah. And the refining takes out most of the toxins, but not all. right? There's still some toxins in there, but the refining also removes many of the nutrients, including the very important antioxidants that these polyunsaturated fatty acids need more than the fatty acids that are like monounsaturates, like that are in olive oil. Those don't even need the protection as badly by the antioxidants as the seed oils do. They need that antioxidant stuff, but it's been stripped out. So that means that when you're cooking with this stuff, it is oxidizing in an invisible way that you cannot see, has nothing to do with the smoke point. And it is generating toxins when you cook with it. And restaurants are doing the same thing. And the worst, most toxic food in restaurants is anything that comes out of a deep fryer.
So French fries.
French fries have been tested. And this is one of the shocking things that I discovered doing the research for this book. I interviewed a toxicologist named Martin Grootveld who tested McDonald's fries in his special little high-tech analyzer. And he found that it had levels of carcinogenic toxins identical to those that make cigarette smoke toxic in identical amounts of a cigarette. One French fry equals one cigarette. So, and I'm going to say this, don't feel bad, moms, if you've been feeding your children French fries or deep fried food, but if you have, you've basically been having your children, giving them a smoking habit. It's like, it's got the health harms of that. And
it's real hard to kick French fries too, because they're so delicious and salty and addictive. Let's be honest.
Totally. But you can get the same flavors yourself if you, are given permission to use salt, which I give you permission. Salt is, the idea that salt's bad. That's another one of those fake news myths. And I think it's all designed to just help us.
Oh, we could do a whole episode on the bad science that taught people not to have sodium. But okay, so I want to back up a little bit here, talking about the smoke point.
Now, that's very important.
When I learned that back in the 90s, the grapeseed oil people hired PR, we were talking about that. They hired a really good PR firm because it worked to denigrate the reputation of olive oil as having the smoke point that if you heat it too much, you're going to get cancer if you cook anything in olive oil that's heated. And I've been now working with friends of mine who make their own olive oil. And it's so funny because they're like, yeah, that's all BS. Like we've been cooking stuff in olive oil again for millennia and it's okay. You can eat it raw, you can cook in it. And you might not want to deep fry in it because it'll be a very expensive deep fried vat of oil. But so the smoke point thing, the irony, and this is where it really starts to piss me off, the irony and that olive oil is actually safe to cook something at, to fry up your meats or your vegetables. And what you're saying, when you heat the vegetable seed oil, hateful 8 oils, they're way more toxic.
Absolutely. Because, smoke means something is leaving your food, right? You're seeing something burn and it's leaving your food. You're not eating it. It's smoked. So like just the very idea that could be somehow unhealthy makes no sense to me. Just on that chemical level. But the real problem with these oils is the invisible oxidation that's occurs. Smoke is visible oxidation, right?
Right.
Burning is an oxidative process, but there are oxidative processes that occur that are invisible, and those are the insidious ones. And those are the ones that we're talking about that make the vegetable oils, the hateful 8, so toxic because oxygen attacks their polyunsaturated fatty acids and breaks those big molecules that nature created that do have a function in our body, that are not toxic, that are actually nutrients when they're intact. It breaks them down into little small molecules that nature didn't create and we are not supposed to eat, but we are eating them in massive quantities. And when we do eat them, they make us sick in many ways, including gut inflammation, which I want to get back to later.
Yes, I want to talk about gut inflammation. And I found it fascinating, the guy who did the study, who actually took the biopsies of our fat stores, because like you said, it's not just like blood work. You can't just like take blood. You have to actually take, when you biopsy something, you're taking a piece of flesh out of somebody's body and sending it to a lab. And the fact that there's been such an increase in the fat stores that are from PUFAs?
Yeah, so that's chapter 3 of Dark Calories, which I call the metabolic problem that your doctor can't see. And there's a lot of darkness going on here. Is why I call it dark calories. Is the doctors don't know about these oils and they're not taught about any of this. So it's hidden from their view and it's just not on their radar in any way. And yes, the polyunsaturates, aside from the fact that the big molecules can break into small toxic molecules when they react with oxygen, so much polyunsaturated fat in our diet, even if we're not cooking it to that point, will alter the formula of human body fat in a way that totally changes its function in our body and totally wipes out its ability to function in our body. And essentially, our cells can't burn it for energy. It's not a good fuel, right?
I was going to say, can you talk a little bit about how it becomes not a good source for fuel? So people are doing keto, let's say, and not able to burn their own body fat stores, or how does that work?
Yeah, whether it's keto or any diet, if you want to lose weight, you have to burn that body fat off, right?
Yeah.
And so if you try to burn your own body fat off while it contains more than your mitochondria can tolerate, because again, it will react with oxygen and become toxic. Just like in the frying pan this happens, it also happens inside our mitochondria. Those same exact toxins develop. This has been tested. It's not theoretical. It happens, folks. And the mitochondria start, shutting down for their own protection. And when your mitochondria shut down, you can't get your cell, that cell that has the mitochondria inside, generating the energy for that cell, no longer is getting energy. And it's in a desperate scenario to get energy. What happens is the cell starts slurping up the little bit of sugar that's always in our bloodstream. It's kind of a backup fuel, but it starts becoming the primary fuel between meals. And this may sound abstract, but here you can tell when this is happening, because if you get hangry 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours after your last meal, I am here to tell you, folks, that is not normal hunger. Hunger is not normal. It is a sign that your body fat is too toxic for your cells to burn. And not only that, it's a sign that you actually have a metabolic condition that doctors don't understand, but we diagnose and use the term all the time called insulin resistance.
Right.
And that is the precursor to type 2 diabetes, right?
Could insulin resistance, because here I'm coming at this from the low carb community, and what I hear is a lot of perimenopausal, menopausal women, myself being included in this group, of feeling like, well, it doesn't work, and it's not. I've been low carb for so long, and I know now there's rumblings that if you're too carnivore or too low carb for so long, you could create insulin resistance, but also to combine with seed oils and because I've always had this kind of attitude like, well, I always cook really healthy at home. So if I'm traveling, no big deal. Of course, you got to eat at restaurants. And now I'm wondering if that kind of lackadaisical attitude about the restaurants has somehow damaged me. Is that, how is this all tied in, is I guess my question.
It is all tied in. And so it comes down to understanding how your body processes energy. And that's why I talk about that in chapter 2 and 3 of Dark Calories. And, whether you're giving your body fat is capable of serving as a fuel. It's just that very simple concept that has so many implications. And what it means is that you're building body fat that you can't burn, or that you can't easily burn off. Your cells really resist burning it off. And they will go ahead and to save their own selves, to save their lives, which is saving your life, right? If all your cells die, you die. Yeah. So in order to save their lives, they slurp up that sugar. And here's what happens when too many cells slurp up sugar. Besides feeling hangry, the other thing that happens is you get a hypoglycemia reaction, which is a stress reaction. We call it that because your body starts secreting stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that raise your blood sugar again. Like we have all heard that stress raises your blood sugar. That's how it's through those hormones. But here's the little detail that people often miss. Where is that sugar coming from? Because we can't store sugar in our body. We don't have a big storage depot. We store a tiny bit in our liver, minuscule amounts in our muscles. The vast majority comes from muscle, bone, your skin itself, anything that has protein in it. Your body has to start breaking down all your protein-rich parts using those stress hormones, because they can do that. And that's what cortisol does. It starts activating the immune system so that your body starts breaking cells down. This is not how you want to lose weight, folks.
No, it
But
is not.
any diet will cause that to happen if you are still eating seed oils, and it's even if you stop eating because they're still in your body fat, it can still be a problem. And so that's why it's more important to know how your cells are energizing themselves than it is to start losing weight. And I teach you how to know that. And it just has to do with paying attention to those hangry symptoms and brain fog and the other symptoms that occur when your body's cells are all in this desperate energy needing state. That is something that is more important than your weight. So paying attention to those hypoglycemia symptoms between meals, and making sure that you don't experience them, that is key to making any diet you want to follow work. And you absolutely need to avoid the vegetable oils. Does it have to be keto? No. But what I like about keto is that it gets rid of the empty calorie sugars, the refined grains, you know.
You just cut it out altogether. Well, it sounds like the very first domino is the seed oils, so that you can prime your fat cells to burn.
Correct. Yeah. Like you have to get rid of the stuff that's building up and acting like a toxin in your body's cells. You have to stop eating that, because it's causing oxidative stress. It's causing inflammation, and it's also misleading people into thinking that they have food intolerances that they don't actually have.
Let's get into that. Let's talk about food intolerances, gut microbiome. Let's talk about that. Being somebody who has celiac disease and leukocytic colitis, I'm very interested in healing of the gut and the maintaining of the immune system and food intolerances. And those are questions I get asked all the time. Hey, my kid has this thing. Can you, I can't do the almond flour, but can we do the, you know what I mean? Like, I'm always trying to come up with solutions to help the individuals.
Right. So let's talk about where these allergies, how inflammation in the seed oils contribute to getting these allergies and these reactions in the first place.
Great.
So that we can kind of understand the time frame of them going away when you stop eating them. And so what happens is these oils that, when you go out to a restaurant and you eat the fried foods or the pan fried foods, they do contain toxins, right? So the vast majority of them is actually, even when they leave the factory, they contain very small amounts of toxins, but it just magnifies when you cook it. They're like little catalysts to form new toxins in there. So every time you cook it, you form a whole batch of new toxins. So you're eating a whole bunch of toxins when you're eating food that's been cooked in these oils. And we'll set aside okay, what about never cooking them? That's a different question. Let's set that aside for a second. So most people eat cooked food.
Yes.
So you're eating toxins that cause inflammation to your gut, right? They promote inflammation. Now, after a while, for a little while, you can handle that, right? When your baby is, let's talk about the very beginning, right? If your baby is getting some of these oils in formula, or if your baby's getting some of these oils indirectly, well, let's not talk about breastfeeding. That's too complicated. But your baby's getting formula, and they have soy oil and canola oil.
That's right. They sure do. And
it's dehydrated, so it's even more oxidized. So the little baby can handle it in the very beginning. But after a while, the gut that is getting the onslaught, the first brunt of these toxins, we have the gut cells and the liver, they have some capacity to handle a little bit. But after a while, that capacity goes away. So somewhere around 2 weeks of life, 4 weeks of life, 6, 12, totally depending on your own baby's metabolism, that baby starts developing gut problems. Doesn't happen to every baby, because some people don't develop some babies don't develop gut problems. But
do you mean like colic or
colic? Yes.
I have had friends of mine, the babies can't keep anything down. They're vomiting. They put them on Nexium or whatever. Not Nexium. What's the other one?
Some of these pills, right? The drugs,
pills.
the
Yeah.
proton pump
Yeah.
inhibitors, yeah,
Mhm.
the protonics and a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Lansoprazole, very powerful drugs. And yeah, so the same thing happens as an adult. It's just that with a baby, it's even more frustrating because you have limited options to even feed them. But
Yeah.
either way, what's happening, adult or child, the pain is coming from the inflammation induced primarily by the toxicity of the oils or other factors that make the gut unable to handle polyunsaturates. And so when the gut is inflamed, it hurts to eat anything at all. Because how does the gut
Yeah.
digest your food? It has to squeeze, it has to
Mhm.
expand, you get gas in there, stretching will cause pain when the gut cells are inflamed. And so you'll be going crazy as a mother, like, I can't feed this baby anything. And that's true. That's because the poor baby is going to be experiencing pain. But if this is the mechanism, like some babies actually do have allergies, right? So, and there's really not an easy way to tell. So I'm talking about this. Allergies are a different thing, different conversation. I'm talking about this conversation that your pediatrician will never have with you because they don't know about this stuff. The inflammation just causes any food to hurt. And what
Right.
happens is eventually you're going to settle on an oil that on a food that has, eventually the baby's just going to either adapt, their cells are going to adapt, they're going to upregulate some of the antioxidants, and whatever formula you're using at that time, you're going to be stuck with forever. Who knows if the formula really is superior?
Right.
It's just that the baby's body started to adapt. Very similar sorts of things happen in adults when they follow one diet after the other, and finally something works. In that case, what finally works is generally, in my experience working with people, generally it's a diet that gets them away at long last from seed oils and or gives them more
Mhm.
nutrients, either that or gives them more nutrients so that they can replete their body's antioxidant arsenal that prevent the toxins from being quite so inflammatory. So does that help to make sense? Like we're
De-
dealing with an
Definitely.
inflamed gut.
I would imagine that I really liked in Dark Calories, I believe it was chapter 3, the illustration of somebody who is supplementing vitamin E as the first line of defense. Because you do talk about supplementation and antioxidants. And really interesting to see and your explanation of how those antioxidants are basically passing the hot potato of the free radical around. And I guess my question is, let's talk solutions. So obviously stopping the hateful eight, but I
Yeah,
want it to be an even bigger solution because we're talking about
yeah,
what you can do as an individual. You can say no. You have obviously personal autonomy and you can say no, provided that you're paying for your own food.
right.
How do we change this systemically? Because I want to be a part of the solution with providing food products, and it's so expensive. And that's the biggest kickback that I get from people. They're upset that the food is so expensive. And I'm like, I know. Trust me, I haven't made a dime in 4 years. I put it all back into the company. But like, how
Yeah.
do we get restaurants to stop? Because it's expensive. We want people to be able to make a living. This is where I get like so passionate about it. So let's talk individual, what we can do for our own personal responsibility, as well as what we can do to help make the change as a society.
So the practical part of the book is the last 4 chapters of Dark Calories, and in there I give you all the strategies that you need to know what to eat when you can eat vegetable oil so that you can make food from scratch at home. And had I known about your brand, I think I would have, I'm sure I would have recommended it. But you know what I'm going to do is, what I do recommend in my book is go to my shopping list and I will put
Oh,
your oil on
I
my
was
shopping list.
good.
Not your oil,
Put
your
the
sauce.
sauce. Yeah, put the sauce on the shopping list. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Uh,
you.
because I
Yes.
tasted it and it is so fresh tasting. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this tastes like it was made with fresh tomatoes yesterday.
Good. Well, we do use organic Italian tomatoes, and we use a really nice EVOO and fresh garlic, fresh basil. Everything's fresh because that's how I make it at home, and I wanted it to taste like that. But it's expensive
Yeah, it sure is.
to
But
make.
so
Yeah.
this is the
Anyway.
practical. Getting back to the practical
Yeah.
strategy. So it's you want to the root cause here of anything and everything that ails you is this condition I teach about in the first part of the book. It's called oxidative stress. It's a chemical state of imbalance that promotes inflammation, degeneration, ages us, and makes us sick before our time. To combat that and to combat the damage done by vegetable oils, which are the main agent of oxidative stress in our food supply today, to combat all that, we have to have more antioxidants in our body, and they've been depleted by these oils. We've also depleted one of the antioxidants called cholesterol, believe it or not. There's a whole chapter on the benefits of high cholesterol. Okay. Now that is a whole talk
I love
in and
that
of itself.
chapter. Yep. You guys got to get the book just for that chapter. It's so great.
Yeah, we have
especially
to
for all of us who are talking to family members who are like, well, I don't know, cholesterol. You'll get some good talking points.
It's so important to understand that that is a myth that goes back to that big scandal from 70 years ago by the American Heart Association. So you want to replenish your body's antioxidants, and it's not just antioxidants like vitamin E and vitamin C and the antioxidant minerals that we all need, that are nutrients that we have to eat. It's also antioxidant enzymes, which are little machines that catch, like those, they're the things that catch the hot potato. It's they're little biological machines made out of protein. So you need to have plenty of protein in your diet, the full spectrum of amino acids. And some of the best protein sources for that are meat, which is why the carnivore diet helps a lot of people. Right. And the keto diet tends to be high in meat, so it helps a lot of people. But unless you're cutting out seed oils, you're not getting to the root. So that's one strategy. The meats, you got to seek out the foods that raise your cholesterol. And in the back of the book, I give you all the tools that you need to bring about major change to your life and your family's life, starting literally tomorrow, if you want to. So I have easy no-cook recipes. I have like how to make a shopping list. I've got like to walk you through the process of getting healthy. Every step that I go over with my own patients, I included in there. And the simple steps sometimes are the most important. And so that includes just working, making a practical shopping list. So all of that is in there, and I really hope it will help you, because those are the strategies I've used that have helped people change their lives. So
that's wonderful. Just real quick before we get to global issues, how long would it take to start to see some results from like the day you're like, I'm your Tara moment, you will never have the Hateful Eight again? Like how long does it take to start seeing some results?
The best thing is that the first meal that you make that fights oxidation and is seed oil free, has healthy fats and everything else in there, you will start to feel more energy. Great. That very first day. And then, that's your breakfast. Then you make a lunch that sustains your energy all the way to dinner. That's the strategy. You make meals that sustain your energy to the next meal, because your body fat right now cannot do that for you. How do you know? You get hangry. You get those hypoglycemia symptoms, brain fog, shakiness, nervous, headache. Some people get nausea. So it's so important to track those symptoms. I give you the tools for that. So that's when it starts, the very day. And then you keep experiencing changes. And like one of my favorite changes is it changes your cravings from unhealthy food, which is all I ever craved, to actual healthy food and things that I never thought possible happen to me. The same for you. Like if you're somebody who right now can't sit in a room with donuts or cookies or chocolate without being wildly distracted by those delicious little morsels, that's how I was. Believe it or not, once your metabolism has been like on this healthy track for a few months, that starts to diminish. And after, it takes a while, but I mean, it's such a profound change. It's worth the wait. It took me about a year or two. Yeah. After about 2 years, I could control myself around chocolate. And then, now Luke bought some chocolates like a year ago when they were on sale. Like he bought this massive amount. And I forget that we're even in the house. Yeah. Right? That would not have been me before this. So that will happen.
I can attest that these are true feelings and you can have them by changing. Good. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because whenever I tell people I have celiac, especially here's what I've learned at the demos. When I'm demoing sauces, which I do almost every weekend, I go into the grocery stores. This is where you learn what the people are talking about with regards to food label, with shopping, with what, with what they've been taught by their doctors. Have these conversations with people. And one lady, for example, she wanted to know the sugar content in the no sugar added pasta sauce. And I said, well, it says on the nutritional panel, 7 grams of carbs per half cup serving, but those are the naturally occurring carbohydrates in the tomatoes. And she says, yes, but what's the sugar? And I said, there is no sugar. And I felt like we were doing a Who's on First comedy bit, because what she wanted to know was what was the net sugar after the fibers, because they have they have those lines. I'm like, yeah, I don't even look at that. So I don't know what you're talking about. I look at total carbs and just go off of that, or actually I look at what's in the ingredient list. And since there's no sugar added and it's just tomatoes, if you can tolerate tomatoes and you're not type 1 diabetic, or maybe not, you know what I mean? So it was an interesting conversation. I was like, okay, so that's happened a lot. The sodium conversation happens a lot. But what happens the most that I've learned, because when I first sampled the sauces, I sampled it with just a little cup and a little spoon. And now I sample it with bread. And so and there's only ever one person per demo. Maybe there's like 50, 100 people who come by. There's always one person who says, I'm celiac, or I don't do gluten and I'm not having the bread. One person. One. And what happens often is, I'm not doing bread. I'm like, okay, so you said no bread, right? And they're like, no, I'll have the bread. I'm like, okay. and it's always really funny because the temptation is there, and I get it. Right. I have zero reaction. I have no temptation with bread. And when I tell people I'm celiac, it's the pity that I get. I'm like, no, I'm totally okay. Like, it's so fine.
Don't miss it.
And you can get there. And I think it's so shocking to people. So that was a really long way of saying that. Quick question for you. I was very happy to see unrefined peanut oil on the list of acceptable fats. And here's why I say that, because I've always told people, if you love to deep fry your turkey at Thanksgiving, just do it in peanut oil, because what are you going to have that once a year? Like what? But then you said, talk to me about peanut oil and unrefined versus refined.
Yeah, so the unrefined peanut oil is, the same like extra virgin olive oil. It's super high quality, just like olive oil tastes like olives. Peanut oil tastes very peanutty. It's delicious, and it has this history of being used as an oil for many, many years. It's been cultivated to have a higher oil content, and that is part of why you can create this virgin oil and still make money in the oil industry. But again, that's not the case with the soy. They was never used for oil, believe it or not. And so you just can't, in an efficient way, get that oil out of there. And so that's why they have to abuse it, and that's why it's toxic. But yeah, so then why is there refined oil? Well, because after you do the quality peanuts, the first press or even the second press, then you have to add higher heat, right? And now when you add higher heat, you get degradation products, and you get byproducts that are not going to taste good. So those have to be removed. But because the oil itself is more stable, because it's relatively lower in the polyunsaturates than the other of the Hateful Eight, and because it's naturally a more oily thing, it just doesn't need the same abuse, the same thermal abuse. There's fewer toxicities created in there. And so less processing required. And so it's refined peanut oil is not on my Hateful Eight, but I don't consider it good either. I consider it empty calories. It's it's in my middle category that I call okay, but not great. Which is really, we're talking about empty calories. There's not nutrition in there. There might be mild toxicity. Deep frying is just an expensive endeavor, because even any oil, even tallow, which is the traditional deep fryer fat, even that can be thermally abused. And it's just kind of gross when you think about it, because you're reusing something that now it has food in it, because
it's so revolting.
Stuff has been extracted from your food. So if you reuse it more than 2-3 times, it just looks different, smells different, tastes different. It's gross. Yes, you shouldn't do that. But so that's expensive, right? You got to fill up the whole thing. So deep frying, too expensive, but you can pan fry.
Is there a database of restaurants The don't use seed oils is that we
Yes.
can support. You have that at your site?
Yes.
Oh,
I
you
think
do. This is wonderful.
it's in the book. I don't have it on my website, but it
Okay.
is in the book, but it's easy to remember. It's SOS, Seed Oil Scout. And you can link to it.
Great.
Yeah, I should put it
Definitely
somewhere on
will.
my website, shouldn't I? I just don't have like a restaurant section. I don't know how to organize that. But yeah, so that's one that I know of.
Get a guy, code it.
Yeah, right.
Somebody knows how to code that into an index.
Yeah.
I will definitely link to that because that again, it's part of the global solution is you have to read every label when you go grocery shopping. So
Yes.
a site like this is amazing, so you can support ones near you. I mean, gosh, restaurant is a tough business. It's a tough business.
It
Profit
is
margins
these
are already
days.
slim to
Yeah.
none.
Well, it's insane because, I mean, the real problem is a global problem. It's a systemic problem. And so
Yeah.
any individual really can only make so much, and they can only have like a niche audience, of like devoted followers who really understand what's going on in the world. But here's how I see the change, happening. I do believe that there's enough doctors out there that want to help their patients, that once doctors learn the real truth about this scandal that started in the American Heart Association 70 years ago and how they have been miseducated, meaning that they are actually lying to their patients, and actually their preventative medicine and their nutrition advice is contributing to the problem. They are part of the problem right now. There are doctors out there, I believe, who really don't want to be part of the problem. They want to be part of the solution. And when they read this book, that's like the secret target audience, right? I wrote it for a layperson because, frankly, let's be honest, doctors don't remember chemistry any better than,
No.
they don't know it any more than a layperson does, after they take the test, practically.
Right. It's done.
Right. So give it to your doctor. If you are a doctor, please read it. On doctor's day, give it to your doctor. On nurse's day, give it to your nurse, et cetera, et cetera. This is where I believe the big change will come because, and I say this because we haven't talked about this, but learning all this, Anna, it changed my love of medicine. I was very dissatisfied when I was practicing in Hawaii and just refilling prescriptions and not knowing if I was making a difference. And my patients would take their drugs and still end up with the heart attacks and the strokes and still have heartburn. The drugs would only work for a little while. For asthma, stop working, you have to give them more drugs, and on it goes with fighting the inflammation and fighting the dysfunction in the body with drugs and drugs and drugs. And you just have to use more and more of them. And I was feeling like this can't be right. It's like nobody's cells are working right. And I knew something was missing. And this was the missing piece. So I've been dying to write this book, literally, I mean, not literally dying, but wanting to write the book for so long, that would help go into this one topic about the seed oils and just how wrong we are trained doctors, dietitians, nurses, massage therapists, anybody who has to pass a test for a license has to learn this misinformation. And so once we get it to the people who go into these fields to make a difference and make people's health better. If you went into it for the money, forget it. You're not going to like this book. But if you went into it to make people's lives better, you will love this book because you will be able to do that.
You have a most beautiful purpose. And with this book, you are executing it extremely well. And my purpose is to nourish people through food. And part of that is educating them and having such smarty pantses on like you to discuss your expertise. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I feel like I think I maybe got to 3 of my questions, and I knew that would happen because there's just so much information. So can we talk again in a few months, maybe like 6 months, and have a follow-up conversation?
Yeah, I would love to.
We'll get some questions from folks after having listened. I would love to do that and continue the dialogue.
Oh, great. Yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
Great. The book is Dark Calories. You guys run to your I mean, when I say run, I mean, use your little fingers and your thumbs and get that book on Amazon or wherever you purchase your books. Thank you, Dr. Cate Shanahan.
Thank you.